he's decided to give back to the community that he grew up in. So tonight at 5 o'clock, we're going to be grilling out in the Rowland Heights, giving away food, playing games, fellowshipping right there in the community. So come join us. And we know the enemy likes to distract, right? So someone, I don't know who, some crazy guy stole Julius's truck last night. And so just be praying for him and heaven as they go through that. I'm going to pray and then we'll begin. Father, I just thank you again for our worship team. I thank you that even when we don't feel it, you are working. I thank you that you are a way maker and a promise keeper. I pray that if anyone doesn't know you today, that they come to know you in a real way. I pray that our priorities realign and you become first, that you are first in our lives, above our spouses, above our careers, above our kids, that you alone are first and we seek you first. In Jesus' name, amen. So this month we're taking a break from the book of John, and we're going to do a 4-week series titled, I'm a Disciple. This series will build on itself each week with the theme being, Since I'm a Disciple. So if you're a disciple, there are things that would correlate with you being a disciple. It would match up to you following Jesus. So this week will be, Since I'm a Disciple, I follow. Next week will be, Since I'm a Disciple, I lead. The following week will be, Since I'm a Disciple, I stay. And the last week will be, Since I'm a Disciple, I go. So if you're a disciple of Jesus, there's certain things that should embody you being a disciple. Because after Jesus was hung on a cross, buried, then resurrected, he came back and gave his disciples a commission. He gave his disciples a task to do, and that task was this: go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. This was the great commission and the task that he left. It was to go and make disciples. Notice it doesn't say, hey, go and make church attenders. It doesn't say go and make good moral people. And it doesn't even say go and do good deeds. No, it says go therefore and make disciples of all nations. So since this is the Great Commission, I would say as a church, we should take discipleship seriously. We should be known for discipleship. And one of my favorite pastors wrote a book. His name is Robbie Galati, and he makes this statement. Every believer, every Christian, that's you and that's me, should be able to answer 2 questions. Question number 1, who am I discipling? You should be able to answer that question if you're a disciple of Jesus. Who am I discipling? And question number 2, who is discipling me? You should be able to answer that question. But the problem is, most churches never talk about discipleship. They just say, hey, come back next week. So we don't even know what discipleship is. We don't even know what walking with people is, but each one of us should be able to answer those 2 questions. Who am I discipling, and who is discipling me? All throughout Scripture, we see discipleship taking place. We see Jesus, right? All throughout Jesus' ministry, what did he do? He walked with his disciples. In Titus 2:4, it says, older women are to train younger women. In 2 Timothy 2:2, Paul trained Timothy to do what? To train other people. And in 1 Peter 4:10, we are reminded to use the gifts that God gave us to serve the body, to serve one another. So over and over and over at Redemption Place, we say this. We say, we are not meant to walk alone. Like one of our slogans at Redemption Place is, community is vital. And you know why that is? Because God did not design us to do life alone. God did not design us for us to walk alone. And if we're really Jesus, then we will not do this walk by ourselves. Being a follower of Jesus is much more than coming to church once a week. It's way more than your Sunday attendance. Being a disciple of Jesus is much more than just reading a devotional. It's much more than you being a better person. And that's why discipleship matters. Before you can ever lead, you must what? You must follow. Before you can ever lead, you must follow. And that's what our verses this morning are going to command us to do. Notice the Great Commission wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't a great idea. This is a commandment given from Jesus and what he commands us to do. 13 times in the Gospels alone, Jesus repeats those two words, follow me. Follow me is a complete sentence. And one of my favorite things that he says about follow me is he never makes them give their qualifications first. He never says, hey, this is the interview process in following me. Let me see if you're good enough to follow me. Let me see if you behave when you're following me. No, he literally gives a complete sentence and he says, follow me. Because if I was to be honest, each one of us in this room, we are either following him or we're following something else. There is no in between, right? You are either following Jesus or you're following the world. You're either going in his direction or you're going in another direction. Each one of us in this room, we're all being discipled by something. Some of us are just being discipled by Netflix. Some of us are just being discipled by TikTok. Some of us are just being discipled by our phones. We are all, whether you would like to admit it or not, being discipled and being led by something. So we better make sure when we talk about discipleship, we are following the right leader and we are going the right way. If you have your Bibles this morning, we're going to read from Matthew chapter 4, verses 18 through 22. Matthew chapter 4, verses 18 through 22. It says this, while walking by the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And he said to them, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. Immediately they left their nets and followed him. And going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James the son of Zebedee and John his brother, in the boat with Zebedee their father, mending their nets. And he called them. Immediately they left their nets and their father and followed him. So we may read that and we may say, wow, good for them. Glad they followed. The commandment is still true for you today. He is still calling us to follow him. In those four verses, what we have is a call and we have a response. The call to his disciples are, follow me, and we can see their response was, immediately they followed. This wasn't a resume process. This wasn't a qualification process. It was literally a decision that he put in front of them that they had to make. What Jesus was doing was he was asking them, he was calling them to leave their old lives and to walk a completely new life with him, where their priority was what? It was being fishermen. So they would have lived their whole life. Hey, we're top-notch fishermen. We're bass fishermen. We're catfish. We do this kind of fishing. We got these kind of nets. We got these biggest. They would have definitely blown Damien out. They would have won every tournament, right? These were like, if the Bible says you're a fisherman, you're a fisherman. So, Damien, congratulations, 10-year sobriety. They would have beat you. No, I'm just kidding. But like literally, these were fishermen, and that was what their priority was. But Jesus shifted their priority, and he says, hey, I'm the new leader in your life. I'm the one you're following now. I'm your direction now, and just simply follow me. Here's some responses I could see today, though. If Jesus came to you, hey, follow me, I could see some of us saying, let me get some things together first. Let me get my schedule right first, Jesus. Let me go look at my calendar first, Jesus. How am I going to provide if I follow you? Matter of fact, where are we even going, Jesus? Give me some time to think about it, Jesus. What if this doesn't work out, Jesus? And I would even have to say, that would be a natural thing to do, right? That would be a human thing to do. Hey, follow me. My next question, where are we going? Follow me? Hold on, where to? That would have been my next natural thought. That would have been human, right? But in doing that, they would have missed and settled for far less than what Jesus had called them to. So if they would have lived in the natural, in their human thinking, they would have missed the supernatural and what Jesus was calling them to do. Instead of the greatest bass fisherman of the year, Peter would go on to witness 3,000 people get saved in one day. I would say he made a great decision. Peter would go on to be talked about for all of history as one of Jesus' disciples. So what we actually leave behind is always peanuts to what we gain. It's that same fight today, though. It's that same fight when Jesus says, follow me. It's still that same struggle, because when it boils down to it, the struggle for me, the struggle for you is always, where is my priority? So we see Jesus gave them a priority choice, right? Is your priority staying and fishing, or is it following me? Make the decision. Is it staying back here with what you know, or is it going to the unknown with me? So what Jesus did is he said, hey, what's your priority? Because we all know where God should be first, and we should follow him. At times when we look at our lives, what we're really following is a paycheck. What we're really following is hobbies. What we're really following is our children, right? If you look at our lives and we say, hey, what's your priorities? Are you following God? If you walk with someone long enough, you'll figure out what they really love and what they really follow. You'll figure out what their identity lies in. So here's what happens when our priorities are out of whack. It goes from this. It goes from, number one, God, and every Christian would probably say, hey, what's your priority? God. Yeah, okay, we'll see. Number one, God, right? Number two, family, and number three, work. But when they're out of whack, they begin to look like this. It may look like work, family, God, or it may even look like family, work, God. So when you look at your priority system, where would your priorities fall in line? When you really say, hey, I'm following God, how can we say I'm following God if family is number one? And I love my wife and my kids, but hey, God can't be third. I love my job, right? But God can't be second. God always has to be up here on my priority list, right? Because notice in these verses, it wasn't the disciples' responses, right? Like he said to them, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. What did they do? Immediately, they left their nets and followed him. No hesitation. Number one, hey, God, you're number one. Immediately, they left their nets and they followed him. Then it goes on to say in the next verse, in case you just think, well, that was just those two brothers. That was just a coincidence. No, in the very next verse, it says, Going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James the son of Zebedee and John his brother. And I thought it was cool, like he had two sets of brothers, and I thought about me and Rob, and I was like, well, I probably would have followed. Rob would have been the one. Nick, hold on, let's think about we got a roof to put on first. I would have been the one, let's go. He would have been, no, I'm just kidding. But James the son of Zebedee and John his brother. But I thought that was cool, like he gave two brothers a decision to make. And they was in the boat with Zebedee, their father. So the first ones just left their nets. The first one just left their careers, but these two brothers, it says, they was in the boat with Zebedee, their father, mending their nets. And he called them. And immediately they left their nets and their father and followed him. They didn't hold on to them. But trust me when I say this, an eternity in heaven will prove it. They made the right decision. They might have thought they was losing in the moment, but look what they gained for all of eternity. They may have thought, man, I was just fixing this net. You want me to leave it behind? I was just fixing this boat. You want me to leave that and follow you? But eternity will prove they made the right investment. Because if you're a Christian and if you're a disciple of Jesus, God always has to be first. He has to be number one, because guess what? God isn't sharing his place with anything or anyone. God isn't scooting over on his throne. He isn't taking a break. Hey, get back to me when you feel like it. No, either God is king of your heart and he's king of your life and you're following him, or you're not. There is no in between, right? So while most of us would say, hey, I love God, does our actions say the same thing? If we live in the Bible Belt, everyone would say, I love God. Everyone would say, hey, I'm a Christian, sort of. But does your actions line up with what we're saying? Do we follow him when it costs us something? We see it cost them something, right? Like they had to leave something behind. It wasn't just boats either. They had to leave their old life behind. Their old patterns, what they had built up behind, right? So do we follow Jesus when it costs us something? Do we follow Jesus when we don't have all the details figured out? Do we follow Jesus until the end? Or are we still trying to hold on to whatever nets that are in our life? Here's what I know. If Jesus isn't first, then we're really not following. And there's a giant difference between going to church once a week and having an everyday relationship with God. There is a giant difference in coming to church once a week and having an everyday relationship with God. So think about this. If you make it to church every single Sunday, and that's pretty radical these days, right? Like, hold on, Nick, we can't miss a few. Like, if you make it to church every single Sunday, that's 52 days out of a 365-day year. If church is an hour, which it is unless I'm preaching. I knew Damien was going to say. If church is an hour, and it usually is, that's only 55 hours a year. If that's what your relationship consists of, then what about the other 8,000 hours in a year that there is? If that's all you're getting fed, that's all your relationship with Jesus is, then how can that truly be considered following him? If we're only worshiping him 52 hours, there's 8,000 other plus hours in a year. That's why we can't limit God to just church attendance. We can't say, hey, following him is, hey, I showed up to church. And we can't surely put him on a shelf and take him off a shelf, because a walk with him is an everyday relationship and never a part-time commitment. Following him is not a hobby that you select when you feel like it and you put down when you don't. Following him is so much more than that. It's not something that, well, I'm a Christian on Sundays, but on Mondays I'm a I do this, or I'm a Christian today and then Tuesday I do that. No, it's an everyday relationship. Being a follower of Christ is being married to Christ. We're one now. We walk together, we commune together, we learn and we grow together. 99% of the time, 99.9% of the time, when I meet with someone going through a difficult season in life, it's almost always true that God hasn't been or isn't number one on their priority list. It's always true. When I meet someone going through a hard season and, hey, I'm struggling, or I'm barely holding on, or I'm going through this, it's almost always true that God hasn't been number one in their life. Because when he is, what happens? Priorities begin to shift. Focus begins to shift. And we start seeing things through a different lens. What was important is not what is important when Jesus is number one. If we're not careful and we don't have people around us when we get off track, even well-meaning, our priorities they can become to look like this. And this is in all honesty what my life could look like if I'm not careful. Like, I'm not some super Christian where I'm like, hey, God, I just spend time with God all day, every day. No. Like, if I'm not careful, my walk with God begins to look like work, family, sports, social media, kids sports, me time, TV time, friend time, and then God somewhere way down the list when I get time. Like, that's when my priorities out of whack, and I could have filled in more blanks, right? I could have filled in work, family, sports, kids sports, social media, YouTube, me time, TV time, friends, relaxation, swimming pool time. God, right? Way down the list. Serving, I could have put that on there. Like, that's what our priorities can look like sometimes. God, I will get to you when I get to you. I will get to you when I have time. And we think there's this mysterious thing that's going to happen, and time's just going to stop. And you're just going, okay, God, it's me and you now. If you're not intentional about following him, time is not going to stop until you make the decision, hey, I'm going to follow you. I'm going to put you first. So I ask us all this morning, what is the number one thing in your life? That's your priority. That's what you're following. What are your priorities? Because that will show you what you truly love. That will show you what you're committed to. Matter of fact, it will always show you who or what you truly follow. Jesus called them to leave what they knew behind, not because he's a cruel God, but because he had so much better for them in return. They were leaving behind what? Their comfort. They were leaving behind the unknown. They was leaving behind what was comfortable. They was leaving behind their careers, their possessions, their positions, their family, their friends, and their safety. But what they was most leaving behind was themselves. They was leaving behind everything that they thought they needed, everything that they identified with, everything that they would have spent their whole life building up. They was now leaving behind to follow Jesus. They put it all on the table. They went all in, and they left it all behind. And I could guarantee if you could hear from them now, they would tell you it was all worth it. It was completely worth it. So maybe Jesus won't call you to leave your job. Or maybe he won't call you to leave everything behind. But he will command us all to follow him. And I don't know what that means for you. I know what it means for me. Nick, do you trust me when you don't want to trust me? Do you trust me when you don't feel like trusting me? Do you know that I'm working even when you don't feel it? And not perfectly, and not without stumbling, but do you follow Jesus? Do you trust in Jesus? Do you believe that Jesus is a better provider than your job is? Do you believe that, hey, I can follow Jesus to the end and trust in Jesus that he will get me through? So what I'm asking us all to do this morning is that I want us all to, hey, where are my priorities? What does my priority list look like? Is God number one in my life? Do I serve God first? Do I trust God first? Am I following him? Or is it something else? And if it's something else, I just want you to be honest with you and God. God, I've been putting this first. I've been putting that first. I've been putting my job first. I've been putting that girl or that guy first. I've been putting sports first. I've been putting this first. Like, I just want us to be honest with us and God. Like, what is it that you've been putting before him? Because something is always fighting for that attention. Something is always fighting for that number one spot. Something is always fighting for that priority. Like, even as a pastor, right? Like, it's always a fight. I'll start out the week, I'm going to read the Bible every day. I'm going to be in my word. I ain't going to be distracted. And here comes Tuesday, and I done watch 48 episodes on YouTube about nothing. About absolutely nothing. But you know where they'll get me every time? They'll put up a 2-minute and 48-second video, and it's just like, okay, I'm just going to do this one time. And by the end of the day, I done watched 6 seasons of Through the Life of the Saint Lunatics. I done learned every member and what they doing and where they are now, and it had no benefit to my life. And meanwhile, I didn't open up my Bible. You don't know who the Saint Lunatics are. You probably didn't grow up in, my age. But really, though, like, I'll start out on fire. Sunday, I'm leaving church. I'm going to be on fire this week. God, you're number one. And Tuesday, I'm distracted. Wednesday, I have to reel myself back in. Okay, Nick, start over again. It's an everyday battle, right? It's an everyday commitment. It's an everyday choice. I'm following you. I'm going to spend time with you. So what the problem is with most of us is when we live this way, we begin to hold on to 2 different things, right? And we say, hey, God, I got you in this hand, but I like this in this hand as well. I'm following you, God, but I'm holding on to this over here too. But that's why when God says follow me, it's not, hey, follow me and hold on. It's let go and follow me. Because here's the problem when we hold on to 2 things. If I hold on to this and I try to follow, what happens? I get stuck, right? I can't go far if I keep holding on to both of these, right? If Jesus tells me to follow him and I'm like, well, Jesus, I got my boat over here, I got my car over here, I got my family over here, and he says, hey, Nick, come follow me, trust in me. Well, I have to let go of something. I have to, hey, Jesus, what do you mean let go? Everything, follow me. Okay, I trust you. And that's what Jesus has done every step of the way, in every part of my walk, when he says, hey, follow me. It's basically, hey, let go of what you're comfortable with. Let go of that thing that you think is completing you. Let go of that thing that you think is giving you identity. And sometimes, here's the newsflash, it's not always bad things, right? Sometimes when Jesus has said, follow me, I had to have been like, oh, Jesus, are you sure? I like this right now. I'm doing pretty good in life right now. Jesus, you should give me a round of applause. He's like, no, follow me, Nick. Come out a little deeper. Trust me a little more, right? I'm doing a work in you that you don't see. Get out of the comfortable zone, Nick. And guess what? A lot of the times I never had to learn God was a provider until I trusted him to provide. And he says, hey, come out a little deeper. Trust me a little more. And I'm like, hold on, Jesus. I wasn't ready for that whole commitment, right? And he says, oh, no, keep following me. So if the disciples would have held on, here's what would have happened. Their heart would have been on what was and not what is. their priorities would have been in the wrong place. Instead of hearing about Peter walked on water, we might have heard about Peter who caught 33 fish in the tournament. Instead of reading John's gospel, maybe we would have read John's fishing guide. And maybe in your life, it may be instead of committed follower of Jesus, will it be best crew member of all time? Best sports parent of all time? Best worker of all time? Best whatever of all time? Is that how the story ends for you? Because every day your priorities will show what you love and what you don't love. And think about what Peter would have done if he would have stayed. Maybe he would have had a trophy for the fishing tournament, but he surely wouldn't have walked on water with Jesus. Like he surely wouldn't have went on to say, hey, you will build my church, Peter. Like think about what he would have lost. Oh, Jesus, you really want me to leave this behind to follow you? And it wasn't like Jesus was like resurrected yet, right? Like they really didn't know. So we actually have the benefit in following because we know he died, hung on a cross, and resurrected, right? So that should be easy for us to follow. When he told them to follow, he hadn't done none of that yet. He hadn't done his miracles yet. He hadn't done the feeding the 5,000 yet. He hadn't seen him walk on the water yet. So they was really going in the blind. We have the benefit of looking behind and saying, whoa, no, we follow the resurrected Jesus, so surely we can trust in him. Surely we can depend on him. But then again, here's where I have to check myself. There have been certain seasons in my life, over and over, where I'm panicking. And I'm like, are you sure, God? When I knew God was calling me out of my old church and I knew God was like, hey, it's time for something new. You know what the hardest thing in my mind was? It wasn't that, I never doubted that I heard God. The hardest thing for me was I was comfortable. I had finally worked and sacrificed so much that it was like, this is easy now. God, now you're going to call me out of this to go back into the uncomfortable again? Hold on. When do I get the easy street? Never. You know why? Because a lot of times we don't grow when we're comfortable. We don't trust God when we're comfortable. So he will take us out of comfortable, put us in the uncomfortable, so we get our eyes back on him. And then a lot of times what we would do, blame it on the devil, right? It's uncomfortable. The enemy's attacking. No, it's probably God getting you where you need to be. I know that's true for my life, right? So I've been like, well, are you sure, God? And then I'm like the passenger seat driver checking the GPS. Does this dude know where he's going? That's what my wife does the whole trip. I got GPS on, and then I got her in my other ear. You went the wrong way, Nick. So a lot of the times what we do, we're checking the GPS, right? And we may even be okay until the road looks kind of bumpy. But still in gentleness and compassion, Jesus says 2 words, follow me. See, most of the time, it's easy for us to follow Jesus when he takes us where we want to go, right? It's easy to follow Jesus when I get everything I want, when he opens up every door for me, and I go every street I want to go, and we're going straight to Florida. It's easy for me to follow Jesus then. It's easy when it's on cruise control, right? But sometimes when Jesus calls, it's, hey, get out of the shallow end. It's, hey, leave those nets behind. Don't bring them with you. Just leave them. Come on a new path. Come on a new journey. Leave all that. You don't even need to pack it up and take it with you. Just trust me that I know where I'm going. So here's what I do in my walk, and here's the danger zones in some of my areas in following Jesus. One of my danger zones is, again, when I'm comfortable. When I'm comfortable, I want to stay comfortable. That's one of my danger zones when I'm like, okay, God, I know you're about to shake some stuff up. Another comfortable spot for me is when he tells me to give sometimes, beyond what I want to give. I find myself holding on tightly, right? Jesus, I trust you, but boy, this money is looking good. So what do I end up doing? Trust Jesus and the money. And then I find myself holding on tightly to this because guess what? I don't think he is the provider. I think my bank account is. So I find myself following two masters, right? But in following two masters, I eventually got to say what? I got to let go of one of them. I can't stay in the middle because staying in the middle keeps me right here. Eventually, we all have to make the choice. So one of my areas is giving. Am I going to follow Jesus or follow my savings? Am I going to follow Jesus or follow my nest egg, right? Am I going to follow Jesus or am I going to follow my paycheck? That's a danger zone for me. Another danger zone for me, and you got to identify your own danger zones and what your struggles are, but another danger zone for me is when God tells me to do something. When he tells me to pray for someone, right? When he says, hey, pay for that person's meal. Ask your waitress, or can you pray for them? And then guess what I find myself holding on to? They're going to think I'm weird, Jesus. They're going to think I'm the weirdo Christian, right? Why are you asking me to pray? So then I got to let go of what? Identity. I got to let go of what people think because I'm more impressed with what he thinks. So one of the danger zones for me, again, is when God tells me to do something. And sometimes I'll hear it so clear and I'll be like, I don't know, God. Then I'll say, God, give me 3 more signs. And then all 3 things, God, then I'll give them like weird. God, let this Bible fall off this desk. And all 3 signs would already happen, and then I'll make up another one that's like seems impossible, right? So that's what we find ourselves doing when it all boils down to its trust issues, right? It's a trust issue in following him or not. It's a trust issue when he's not number one. Because we all find ourselves trying to hold on to what we know. We all find ourselves, we try to play it safe and not truly just trust in him. Here's where we go back to our verses, though. And I'm going to hurry up. I know I've been preaching for a while. Notice when he told them to follow him, he didn't ever give them a 10-step plan on where they was going. He didn't say, hey, follow me, we're going to go on easy street. Follow me, and life's going to be easier and better, right? And everyone will love you when you follow. He didn't never tell them that. And matter of fact, when they followed, you know where all of them ended up? They all ended up being persecuted and dying. So if they lived for the world and followed, they would have been like, that wasn't a good deal. They followed him until to death, right? But again, eternity will prove they made the right choice. He didn't try to sell them on an idea or a great plan. His complete sentence to them was follow me. And that's his complete sentence to all of us this morning. So if you're struggling and you're hurting, follow him. If you're lost and you're lonely, follow him. If you're depressed, follow him. If your marriage is struggling and on the rocks, follow him. If things aren't going your way, follow him. If you need forgiveness, follow him. If you don't know where to turn, follow him. And if you don't know where to go, follow him. It's always a complete sentence. And the worship team, you can come up. The answer is always the same. I don't care if you're doing good or you got drunk this weekend. Start following him right now. Realign your priorities, realign your commitments, and trust in Jesus. This morning, what I want us to do is some soul searching. And I want us to ask this question. What if this was our priority list? I think we got one more slide maybe. Like, what if the priority list was just number 1, Jesus? Maybe we don't have it, but What if, like, this was your priority list, really? Like, even cancel out number 2 and number 3. What if your priority list just started with God? God, you take me where you want to take me, even if these other 2 don't work out like I want them to work out. Because here's what I found true. When I follow my family, I get lost. When I strive to work on my own and do things on my own, I get lost. But when I follow God and make him my priority, these 2 seem to realign themselves. When I follow God, I am a better husband. When I follow God, I am a better father. When I follow God, work works itself out. I don't have to manipulate a job, or I don't have to manipulate my income, right? God takes care of these 2. God takes care of the rest of the list when we have number 1 and we put Jesus first. See how that worked out? That's my brother. He did a good job right there. But really, though, like, what if our priorities just started and ended right here? Number 1, I'm following Jesus, come what it may. How would that affect your life? You don't know until you do it. And here's what I know. You can't follow Jesus and follow the world because you're holding on to 2 things. You got to let go, right? I'm following Jesus. He is number 1. What he says goes because he's king and I'm not. He's the provider, I'm not. He's the leader and I'm not. He makes the rules and I don't. When Nick gets himself into trouble is when Nick erases Jesus and puts Nick instead. Because that's the hardest thing, because when I'm not following Jesus, I'm following Nick Martin. And guess what? My plans are nowhere near as good as his. Sometimes I'll be doing it with the church, right? I'll be trying to plan, well, how can we do this? How can we do that? And my wife will tell me, is that God or is that you? And I'll have to pray and I'll have to admit, right? Like, hold on, God, I need to slow down and just trust you. I don't have to manipulate. So this is our priorities and where it needs to be is, number 1, Jesus. Just Jesus, period, right? So how do you think it would impact your kids if that was your priority? You know why a lot of kids left the church? Because they heard their parents maybe talk about Jesus in church, but out of church it was like, who's Jesus? So a lot of kids, what happened is they grew up and was like, well, we went to church, but we don't really know who this Jesus is outside of church. So how do you think it would impact your kids if that statement was true? Jesus is number 1, and kids, you are not. How do you think it would impact your job? You might get fired, right? Do you think that job is the provider, or is Jesus the provider? How do you think it would impact those around you if that statement was true? Number 1, Jesus. You might lose some friends. You might lose some family members. You might not be the most popular, right? How do you think it would impact your life? Here's what I want us all to do. Today is going to be a declaration day, right? If Jesus hasn't been number 1 in your life, if you've been on the fence, if you've been holding back, symbolically, I want you to let go of whatever it is you're holding on to. I want you to let go of that and say, hey, Jesus, you are number 1. The altar will be open if anyone needs to pray. If anyone needs to recommit, hey, Jesus, you're number 1. There will be people that will pray for you. But this day forward, this should be our statement. Hey, Jesus, God, you are number 1. We are following you. We are all in on you. We are trusting in you. Help realign our priorities. Help realign our focus. Help trust in you more. Help us be disciples who simply follow your commandment, follow your 2 words in following you. Let's worship.